Thank you, Dr. Ratana, for that kind introduction. ท่านคณบดีดร.อาจารย์มานุชาติดร.รัตนานักการศึกษาต่างประเทศนักศึกษาไทยทั้งหลายที่เคารพเป็นเกียรติอย่างมากที่มีโอกาสวันนี้ที่จะบรรยายที่คณะใหม่เป็นคนแรกใน Public Lecture Series. It's, as Dr. Ratana said, 49 years ago, I started my academic career here at พระประจาน at ธรรมศาสตร์ University, and I never imagined when I was thinking about what I wanted to do in the future, ไม่เคยคิดจะเป็นครูไม่เคยคิดจะเป็นอาจารย์ never entered my mind เพราะว่าเป็นขี้อายเป็นคนขี้อายมาก very shy, so the idea of teaching in front of a lot of people was not attractive at all. So I came to ธรรมศาสตร์. At Minnesota, our motto is driven to discover. Driven to discover is the motto of the University of Minnesota. So when I came to Thammasat, I discovered teaching and fell in love with teaching. Had a wonderful time teaching here 49 years ago at the Graduate School of Public Administration. So you can see, ผมเป็นวัยรุ่นจริงๆนะสอนที่นี่49 ปีที่แล้วนะสอนประเด็นศึกษา So at the first, I will talk quite a bit about just the experience of doing research in Thailand. And doing research in Thailand is really two worlds. It's like one side of the moon and the other side of the moon. Sometimes doing research in Thailand is just like, you're someone, you're in heaven. Other times, is very famous for being very frank place where you can talk very openly. This, you're not your own. So it's two different worlds now, two different worlds. And so I'll talk about both the good aspects of doing research in Thailand and doing research and then some of the not so pleasant aspects of that. And then since Dr. Ratana said I've been following Thai education, this is my 6th decade of working on Thai education. So I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts about how I see the current problems in Thai education. And then at the end, if there's time, there may not be time for this, but I can share the information with you later, talk about some best practices in doing highly robust, rigorous, cross-culturally sensitive research in Thailand. These are some basic operating assumptions. First of all, I think it is quite legitimate for outsiders to study another culture, another educational system. It's quite appropriate. I have Thai friends who know so much about Japan or China or Vietnam. Dr. Wiwat Muganti at Chulalongkorn University started American studies there, started Canadian studies there. Oh, Ajahn Wiwat, he knows much more about America than I do. That's his field. So I think it's okay for us to study other cultures and societies, and we have a kind of a third eye, we can see things from a different perspective. Also, we have to be very, very careful about this issue. We must make very clear what our basic value premises are, our positionality, divine transparent. And Bernard Riddall is a very famous Swedish social scientist who got the Nobel Prize. He strongly stresses we must make clear our value premises. It influences everything we do in our research. And Dr. Ruth Behar is a very well-known anthropologist at the University of Michigan. She got the MacArthur Genius Award. She's a Jewish Cuban background. And she also says we must make clear what our value premises are, because that influences the questions we ask, it influences the topics we choose to study, and the way we go about doing our research. And we need to make very clear what our basic assumptions are. Since I'm at the University of Minnesota, I must mention that we are very proud of our Thai who graduated from Minnesota. When I was working in Thailand in the 1970s, I had the opportunity to work closely with Dr. Wijat Sisaan, with Dr. Somwang, with Dr. Tony. At the time, I never imagined that I would actually end up being a professor at the university that trained these very prominent Thais. So all these people graduated from Minnesota before I went there to teach. Dr. Rania is the only one that I actually taught. She's now the Rome Kanapati Vichan T. Kurusa Tichula, very capable person who's created actually a new helped create a new faculty of psychology at Chulalongkorn University. She's not in the faculty of education, she's in the faculty of psychology. But as you can see, these people are, Dr. Wijan is Mr. Nawatakam, Mr. Innovation. He created the idea of Sukhothai Kamatirat Open University, which is very innovative, reaching all parts of Thailand with university without walls. He created the basic concept of the autonomous university with the Surah University of Science and Technology and the processing lab. So these people have and Nomnul Bungula, fascinating, absolutely fascinating lady. There's a new biography of her written by Susan Kepner at Berkeley. Her whole life is just so fascinating. And she talks about her life in Minnesota and the impact that had on her. So we're very, very proud of these alumni. We don't have a lot of alumni because Minnesota, so cold. But the Thais who go to Minnesota and can survive our winters. When I came here last week, the temperature was Celsius 0.6. Oh. So if Dr. Weed just said if you can survive Minnesota, you can do anything. You can do anything. And also there are many examples in this age of internationalization, globalization, in the era of Pachakomazi and AEC. These are just some examples of some highly productive, collaborative research that's been done by Thai people with Franc people. Dr. Holmes and Suchida know many Thais working in the private sector primarily to learn about their Japanese colleagues, their Korean colleagues, their German colleagues, their French colleagues, their Italian colleagues, how to work with them effectively. And Dr. Pasuk and Chula and Chris Baker have done many, many studies that have been very valuable about Thai history, Wanakadi Thai, many, many areas. So these are just some examples of the creative collaboration, and I hope your faculty will encourage this kind of creative collaboration with scholars from other countries and cultures, especially your colleagues within the Pachakom ASEAN, within the ASEAN area. And I've been very fortunate in my own career to have the chance to work with and publish articles, books with many, many wonderful Thai colleagues. And this is part of the joy of living in Thailand, working in Thailand, to be able to collaborate with scholars of this type and write with them, publish with them. It's been a wonderful ride and a wonderful experience to work with such absolutely wonderful people. And when you work with people from other cultures and you're writing, what is wonderful, you have 4 eyes rather than 2 eyes, but it's really 1 + 1 = 3 because you get the different cultural perspectives. So if I'm writing alone, and it's mirror checking. If I write something and I'm misunderstanding Thailand, then Dr. Supang or Dr. Amroom or Dr. Room can correct me and say, Jerry, you are misunderstanding this. This is how you need to better understand what you're seeing. So I feel pretty good when I think back about my career and what I've done. I don't think probably too many Farang researchers have collaborated. We are a very individualistic culture, and many of the outstanding Western scholars do their work alone. They don't necessarily, so I feel very, very lucky to have collaborated with such, as you see, some of the people are from Isan, some of the people are from Chiang Mai, they're from all over the place, some Chula, different universities. Actually, I've only done one thing with my wife. And I met her at Thammasat. I met my wife, Kutasani. She was a student walking around here. So this is very nostalgic coming home to the place where I first taught and where I met my wife. And we did only one thing together, but we did at least one thing together academically. This is the International Society for Technology and Education. She was worked there for about 10 years. And she graduated from VIDA. And I'm also continuing to collaborate with Thai researchers at the moment. Dr. Ratana Lala a new book that I'm working on, Rethinking Thai Education, that will be published later this year by Springer. Patanida at the Sapakan Sao, we are planning a book about influential Thai educators, past and present. This will be kind of Roachi with Dr. Gaw, of Mongluang, Pin Malakun, many influential Thai educators, including people like His Majesty the King, teacher of the land. So it includes a wide variety of very prominent Mongluang, Manit, Chumsai, many Dr. Subham Gekutad, etc. And then Dr. Pawani just graduated from the University of Minnesota, and she and I are working on a project, Research Productivity of Thai Universities. Napapon at the Ministry of Education on internationalization of Thai universities. But I also work with people in very remote parts of Thailand. Dr. Rosarin, I'm very proud of her. She just got her, in fact, she's getting her PhD on March 9th, officially. She's the first person in her cohort to get her PhD. Bin Ajahn, Iyu Jangwat Ganda Nisunak at the time. She's from Hougang province, and she's from the most remote part of the most remote province. And she just got her PhD, came up with a really good model for trying to improve the quality of math education for children in remote disadvantaged areas of Thailand. And her mother's name is Molly Chien, and her mother was, and this is very relevant to her discussions about the leadership roles of Thai women in the countryside. Her mother, Molly Chien, was the first ever Gamnan in Thailand to be a woman. And it's interesting, Rosarin's Sanchat in Thai, that Chuchat bin Lao Punan. She's not even mainstream ethnic Thai or mainstream ethnic Lao. She's from a subgroup of the Lao group, Lao Tuan. So I'm very, very proud of both her mother being the first ever female Gamnan, and then now that she got her PhD, even though it shows that you talked about before in the video about Thammasat Sahiyapan. What is the potential of people in really remote areas who are very talented? And this is an example of how someone at Tapicha, the lady I mentioned before that I worked with, she came from a remote part of Sisikat and got a very good PhD, did a wonderful dissertation, despite coming, and she's of a Khmer background, but also realized that potential. I've also had the privilege of learning from many of these Thai people with whom I've worked with over the past 6 decades. And what a privilege to work with Mongjao Supatradit Isipu. He was actually president of Singapore University, not far from here. He's the direct grandson of King Rama IV. You can see how young I am. I work very closely with the direct grandson of King Rama IV, who was a contemporary of Abraham Lincoln. Wow, I'm really young. UNESCO mentions that, and Ajahn Supat was a walking encyclopedia. He just had so much knowledge about Thai art, history, the royal family, all things royal. And UNESCO declared recently that Ajahn Supat was one of the greatest intellectuals of the past century. So I learned from so many wonderful people. And these are just some examples. Dr. Nikom taught me a lot about the Thai labor market situation. He's a labor economist who was very active many years ago. And I learned so much from Dr. Sipinam Getutan, the educational reformer. Some more individuals with whom I've learned so much. Dr. Agrawit has done a lot with the local wisdom, local knowledge in Thailand. And Dr. Gowan helped me to understand the very complicated Thai testing system. And I understand he's still very active going to Burma, helping the Burmese with the development of test and measurement in Burma. Wonderful man. And also, as professors, I think the greatest thing about being a teacher and being a professor is just seeing your students and what they accomplish. There are intellectual descendants, not our biological descendants, but our intellectual descendants. So I feel very proud some of my former students and what they've done. 3 became university presidents. Dr. Kun Rahan, who was a student right here at Thammasat with me, should have been the Auditor General of Thailand, but got cheated out of that position through some nasty politics. That's the kind of the hell part. And I think Dr. Lily was my former student. I think she became the Romatigantadi here at Thammasat for a while. I think she's now at Khon Kaen University in their school of local government. And I think Kunatia, the Bangkok Post, is now poised to become the first ever female editor of the Bangkok Post. She's a wonderful journalist, does excellent work for the Bangkok Post, and I hope that does happen. And China Rong was one of my students here at Thammasat. He became a very prominent business person, also became very active with the governing board of UNESCO, working with Anjo Soman. This is my favorite quotation from Buddhism. It's the Gautama Sutra of the Lord Buddha, and it was shared by the Lord Buddha 2,500 years ago. But when you look at this, this is the essence of really very deep progressive pedagogy, long before Thomas Dewey, long before Paulo Freire, long before Vygotsky, long before Ivan Illich. Right there in the Gautama Sutra saying that we should be skeptical, we should be critical, we should learn from direct experience. And in terms of my own value premises, I like to use the metaphor of gold. And here, black gold, I don't mean oil. Sometimes people refer to black gold as oil. By black gold, I'm referring to concerns about Kwam-Yuti-Tam, social justice, equity, equality, fiscal neutrality. A person's education and the quality of their education should not depend on where they live, in Buriram or in Bangkok, or the wealth of their family. That should be our goal. Yellow gold, cultural preservation, Prachathipatthai Thang Wattanatham, cultural democracy. Very concerned about protecting threatened languages. Thailand has such rich cultural diversity, linguistic diversity. We have in Thailand today, there are actually 74 to 85 different languages in Thailand. And some of them are threatened because they're small languages spoken by small numbers of people. There's a village in northeast Thailand where people are speaking classic 6th century Mon language. And I'm very pleased with the new Isan language revitalization project in Khon Kaen. If you go to Khon Kaen University now, you see signs written in Phasa Isan. And I think this is a very encouraging development happening up in the Northeast. And there's a new national language policy that was developed by the Thai Royal Academy, and it was actually signed into law by Prime Minister Abisit. The question is, will it be implemented? Blue and green gold are more concerned with the environment. And I'm very pleased that one thing in Bangkok, I noticed that the pollution today in Bangkok is much less than it was in the past. And I think the reason is because of the SkyTrain, the subway, and so many, I think now all the taxis use natural gas and are not polluting. The world do. All these vans that run between different places, they are using natural gas. And I believe Dr. Anuchan, when you were the vice president at Mahidol, you had the vision to change Mahidol into a campus CTO, a green campus. And that's a wonderful. I was at Salaya and saw the change. I used to teach at Mahidol, and it was wonderful to see this new green campus emerging. So it's really important to teach our students. This is education for sustainability. I think your Prime Minister was just mentioning this yesterday. We need to teach our students to be very environmentally conscious and to think about living in a more sustainable way. This gets back to this education. And I think when we do research, we should think very seriously about not doing research that harms people or that causes problems. I'm very frustrated when I see people doing research. Why don't we do research that's going to be positive, that will improve the situation, not do research that causes problems. And also, We need to be sure that all people can achieve their potential. And I don't like to think in terms of what I wrote here as deficit thinking. What's wrong with the black people in America? Why are so many black people in America in jail? Why are so many people not getting a good education? That's a deficit way of thinking. But we should think about, and the same thing with why are so many Isan people not well educated? That's true. A lot of Isan people are not well educated. We should not think in those terms, but what is the potential? Like Dr. Tapicha, like Dr. Wilson, what is the potential? How can we, as educators, and that's why I'm so glad you have this Dr. Thomasan, how as educators can we allow them to achieve their potential? That's our goal as educators, to let every person achieve their potential. I feel so fortunate. My father did not go to high school. Paul might have read in Matthew. Man might have read in Mount. Yet I can have the opportunity to study at institutions of high quality. So those are my basic value premises. I'd like to start with one example. This is a study that was done a long time ago by Mark Blau. Mark Blau is one of the world's most famous economists of education in England. I don't know if Dr. Ratana, you met him when you were in England or not. He's done a lot of work, very influential. And this was one of the very first major studies of higher education, looking at the returns to investment education, published by the Sapakan Siksa back in 1971. However, there's some problems with this research. I use it as an example of a problematic research. The research itself was really, in general, quite good. It was a major, valuable study. But Blau was the only author. And I don't think Mark Blau, for example, speaks Thai. So he was able to do this research because there were many people at NIDA who were able to help him do the research. And they should have been, in my view, they should have been co-authors with Dr. Blau, not just Dr. Blau himself. Then in this study, as I looked at the study, they had a key variable. A key variable in their study was the school a public school where the person attended, or was the school a private school? Think about that. Public school or private school? Makes no sense. Makes no sense. In Thailand, you have many public schools that are very good, right? Saket, Kasetsat, very good school. Saket, Sinakurenro. You have public schools that are outstanding. Then you can go to public schools that are a remote part of Buriram or a remote part of Chaikum that I don't know, some are very poor quality. Private schools, you have some that are very outstanding private schools. And then you have some that are very low quality. So what you need to do is to compare the high quality schools with the low quality schools, not the private with the public. So that was a kind of fundamental misunderstanding. And it was a great data set. And so when I came to Thailand, I was curious. What are these valuable data? Hit and run. Hit and run. Dr. Blau got the data with all this great help from the NIDA people and took the data back to England. And the data were not available here in Thailand. They were not. I was very disappointed. These are great data that could be used by Thai students, Thai professors. Huh? But the data are aggregate data. These are aggregate data. They don't mention the names of the people. I just want the aggregate data to be available. So I was very disappointed. Finally, I found the data in Bangkok. After a long search, I finally got the data in somebody's garage, somebody's closet. Very difficult. So this was a great study, but also had these problems. These are examples that I would like to offer of some individuals that I think have done really outstanding work. Charles Keyes. I don't know if any of you have met Dr. Keyes. This is his most recent book, and I'm very disappointed that it's in very few libraries of the world. It's about Isan. He's been studying Isan for the last 6 decades, primarily doing research in Mahasarakam. It's a wonderful book, really helps us to understand the Viwatanagam of Isan, how the Isan culture has evolved and has become very cosmopolitan. couple of years ago, I taught a Anuban class in a very remote part of Isan. And what I did at the beginning of the class was I just went around and asked the students, พ่อแม่อยู่สายพ่อแม่อยู่สายพ่อไปเฮ็ดเวียกที่บรูไนแม่ไปอยู่ไต้หวันพ่อไปเป็นอินเดียพ่อไปอิสราเอลตกใจThe children are, because when we teach, we should start with what the children are, right? How to connect with the children and speak their own language. So they were very happy I was asking about their parents. They were proud their parents were all over the world. Then we have a map in the classroom. Brunei Yusai, you have to go find Brunei on the map. Libya Yusai, you have to go find Libya on the map. ผมสอนมารุบาลสนุกมาก I love teaching the small children. They're so innocent. They're so curious. Keith Watson is at Reading University. He did a wonderful book on the history of Thai education, which I highly recommend. Very thoughtful, very good analysis of the history. And since it's history, it's not out of date, even though it was written a long time ago. And oh, good idea. Save me. That's good. Thank you. And David Wyatt at Cornell wrote a wonderful book about the Pataru Nansaksa of Rachananที่ 5. Really detailed, very fine analysis. He was a professor at Cornell for many years. And Peter Ware down in Australia has done very valuable work on regional disparities and acquainted me with the idea of meso-analysis. You have macro, you have micro, but meso is looking at regional differences. And I think much of the political polarization that Thailand experienced from 2006 until last year related to regional issues and regional disparities. And Peter Ware has documented this very carefully. He's an economist at ANU. And then Philip Hallinger, who's actually hosting a major event in which I'm involved starting on Sunday and Monday, is a professor of the Hong Kong Institute of Education, has worked closely with Ajahn Gassama, and has done a lot of good work on the implementation of Thai education reform and educational leadership in the Thai educational setting. So these are just some examples of really outstanding researchers from outside. In terms of influential Thai educators, I did look up Prince Damrong in World Cap, and I think he's actually the most productive Thai researcher of all time. He was the direct son of King Rama IV, and his books are in 811 libraries of the world. And I believe here in Bangkok there's a whole library just of his, devoted to his life accomplishments. It just shows, again, the tremendous potential of Thai scholars. And Ajahn Sulak wrote a whole book about Prince Damrong, which I've not had a chance to read yet. I think it was published by the United Nations University in Tokyo. What's ironic about the World Cat data, when you look at the data about books about Thailand, what's really bad is the good books like the book by Dr. Thai's, very few libraries have it. Which book do you think has the most in the world about Thailand? Apart from Damrong, there are a lot of books that Damrong, the book that's in the most libraries of the world, and The King of Siam by Margaret Menger. By the recent Pasana, translated into 24 different languages, and it's one of the worst. It distorts Thai history, Thai culture, it relates to this crisis of representation, but it's in more libraries than any other book about Thailand. And Lomax's book, Thailand, the War That Is, The War That Will Be, by a Los Angeles journalist, is in so many libraries, far more than Dr. Thai's book or my books. And Lomax predicted, เขาแน่ใจว่าเขาอยู่เมืองไทย3 อาทิตย์อยู่นาน3 อาทิตย์อยู่เมืองไทยนานเข้าใจดีลึกซึ้งบอกว่าประเทศไทยจะเปลี่ยนเป็นคอมมิวนิสต์ He was very confident. He spent 3 weeks in Thailand. Became an instant expert about Thailand. And that book is in so many libraries. So there's an inverse correlation between the quality of the book and the number of libraries. It's very sad, except for the Prince Damrong. His books are in so many libraries. Okay, let's get to the heart of this presentation. These are the good things. This is the heaven. Thailand is really data rich. Let me give you an example. for my last book, I needed to get data for every Thai election since Thailand became a constitutional monarchy in 1932. I needed data. I wanted to know how many people voted in the election. I needed to know how many MPs Gitsankong got, how many MPs Pachap got. I needed to detail it for every election. So I decided I'll go to Surachagan. I went out to Jangwatana, to the National Election Commission. I don't know anyone there. Korewa, I have no contacts. The Japanese say I have no connections. I just go there and said, I'm doing research. I need these data. Can you believe after spending about 3 hours being very polite, I finally found a person there that had the data. And when I left, after 2 or 3 hours there, I had that data. I have the data for every election in Thailand, what percentage of people voted, how many MPs each party got for every single election since 1930. How many countries could you do that? The Thais are very open about sharing data. This is an example of Thai grade literature. It has incredible, it's published by the Ministry of Education. It just has incredible, it's mostly in Thai, but partially bilingual. It has all the data on the international students coming to Thailand. How many are coming from France? How many are coming from Japan? How many are coming from Korea? Changes over time. It's just a really valuable book. I used to get a book similar to this that showed me where all the people passing the entrance exam to Chula, Kasetsat, Hamasat, how many were from Buriram, how many were Sistiket, so I could calculate probabilities of opportunity. So this is what we call gray literature, and it's just got incredible detail. Incredible detail.
It's about 10 years ago because this year is
No, this is I need to get a more current one. This is 4 years out of date. Yeah, this is out of date. So, but I'm sure they have a current one. I got this about 4 years ago. And Thailand also has great library resources. They have great library resources, but they're scattered all over the place. Next Tuesday, I will spend next Tuesday at the Thailand Information Center, Champo, Kongkong Chua. They have a wonderful Thailand Information Center. That was the vision of Dr. Wivat Mungandi. And I will spend the whole day there. And they try to collect all the key books and information about Thailand. Probably you have to go there to access these materials. They're not available online. Another thing about Thailand is low cost. When I came here to do my dissertation research, I spent 18 months in Thailand. 18 months in Thailand because it's so low cost here. When I bring students here, and they go to the canteen at Khon Kaen University, or they go to the canteen at Hamasat, they can get a nice meal for the riga for $1. Over the weekend, I was down in Pattaya. I'm very interested in sports, so I wanted to check out the Hana Classic LPGA. So I traveled back from my resort in Pattaya to my residence where I was staying in Nonthaburi, and the cost for my travel from Pattaya, the Pattaya resort, which is not in downtown Pattaya, I spent a total of 230 baht to travel from the resort there to my residence in Nonthaburi. Where in the world could you travel that kind of distance? I was traveling from Nong Khai to Bangkok because there was no second-class sleeper available. I had to take third-class train. It was about somewhere around. So Thailand has really low cost. So that really facilitates doing research. Dr. Wiggry said, and he's quite right, Thailand is a very affiliated society. I did a study of the academic culture at Kasetsat University, where I live right in the center of the campus. And Thai love to work in groups. Much prefer working in groups to individuals, so it's very easy to collaborate with Thai people in that sense. Good infrastructure. Look at this wonderful seminar room we are in now. Thailand has, over the years, really developed its infrastructure. The Thailand Information Center, where I will work on next Tuesday, has really good infrastructure. Very comfortable place to work. And then there's been this explosion in the Thai publishing and book industry. Just so many books and publications that are being published in Thailand. When I first was teaching at Hamasat in 1966, there was hardly any. The publications were very limited then, but now there's just so much. And in the United States, we're closing bookstores. But here, Asian books now, I think they have like 14 they have branches all over Bangkok. They have so many bookstores here. I just saw one at Hong Kong today, a really nice bookstore in Hong Kong today. And then the States borders was closing their shops. And you can get really high response rates in Thailand. Dr. Pawani, who just graduated from Minnesota, she needed to interview many key people for her dissertation here in Thailand. She got a 100% response rate. 100%. When I was doing my dissertation here, I approached 30 organizations to get data from them. I had to spend a lot of time at their organizations interviewing their staff. Out of 30 organizations I approached, 28 said yes, 2 said no. So if you're polite and you respect the culture, you can get really good participation in Thailand. In Thailand, as I shared that book, has lots of great literature. Are you familiar with great literature? Great literature is the kind of literature, the book I just passed around. You can't buy this at Asian Books. You can't buy this at Barnes & Noble. This is great. Great literature is not commercially available. The annual report of Nike. That's a very interesting book. The annual report of Nike. You can't buy it at the bookstore. That's great literature. What I love about Thailand are the cremation volumes. I'm sorry that Thai people are dying. We're always sad to see people die, but when you go to a Thai funeral, they always give you a cremation volume that has valuable information in the cremation volume. And I believe, I haven't actually checked this out personally, but I believe if you go to the National Library of Thailand, they have all the cremation volumes. So Prince Supan, you would have his cremation volume. Dr. Paul, you would have his cremation volume. Dr. Silicon. These are really valuable resources. I remember I had one, I actually went to the funeral, and it was a man I met when I was teaching at Thammasat. He was a Thai political scientist, and there was a letter from Bill Clinton in the cremation volume. So those are valuable examples. Thailand, I think, is, and then you have all these reports done by NGOs. Once I was in Manicaon, I got a really cool report done by the Shan people, written by the Shan people about their history, very critical, very frank, candid. And I checked the World Count, I think there are only 3 copies in the whole world. I have one of them. So that's that great literature you can pick up in Thailand. And also in Thailand, it's easy to make contact with influential people, which is much more difficult in other societies and cultures. And then Thais are just really kind. I think since I've been working in Thailand, I think I've received probably more than 100 books from people. They say, I'm interested in Thailand. Oh, have you seen this book? Oh, I'll just give it to you. I was over in the New Road area a few years ago, and the person noticed that I have respect for your king, His Majesty King Bhumibol. Maybe they noticed I was wearing a wristband or something, and they said, are you aware that our king is a good photographer? I said, sure, I know he's a good photographer. Then they asked me, are you aware that he has published a book of his photographs? I said, no, I wouldn't. They said, would you like to have a copy? They just gave me a copy. It was a CD, but it's so beautiful, all the king's best photographs. And I cited it in the book I just completed, and if she hadn't given me that book, I would not have known that. But all the time, people are just, it's so wonderful to get these. This is some of these are rather heavy volumes. This is Wat Chao Yu Hua, Gap Wat Thai. Yu Hua, Gap Wat Thai. Your king and the Thai temples. Beautiful, richly illustrated book. Someone gave this to me. And this is not great literature. I think this is public. You could probably, it's a limited edition, but you could probably buy it somewhere. That's yeah. And this is another one given to me, another heavy volume. This was actually a translation of a book by William Stevenson, a man called Intrepid, The Secret War, 1939 and 1945. Beautiful book, was translated by your king, His Majesty King Bhumibol. And somebody said, oh, since you are interested in the king, you might want to see an example of his translation. And so, Are you familiar with Alpha Research? The owner and the manager is Prabhut. He's a graduate of Thammasat. And they have, it's kind of like the private National Statistical Office of Thailand. And they have some really good books with all the data from Maheng Son, from Sisaket, all the detail. I really needed the data. And so I went back to my room at Sasa, I was staying at Chua, and he had given me. I paid for one book, but he gave me all the rest free. And just left them for, I've never met the man. I hope to meet him on this trip to thank him. But, and then one time I went back to my room at Sasa, and there was a big box of books. I said, what is this? I said, John Bunchna would like you to have all these books. Everything he had written in Thai and English, including his wonderful autobiography of his time as ambassador to the United States. He just gave them all those books. So it's a wonderful climate where people are willing to share so many things with you that help your research. And then in terms of interviewing here, I've worked in the United States teaching at Stanford, Oregon, Minnesota. I have worked in the United States teaching for 38 years. And I've met one politician, Senator Wellstone, and we had a nice chat for 30 minutes. But as you can see here in the Thai context, I've met many cabinet ministers. I've had a chance to talk to 5 of your prime ministers. So this is something very unusual that you can have access. Susan Kepner, who just wrote this wonderful book about Somon Gulula, she was in Thailand for about a week. And Princess Patek heard that she was in Thailand and invited her to have lunch. So it's just an amazing situation where a foreign researcher can have access to these people. As I say, I've never met a single U.S. president. I've only met one Senator Wellstone. But here you can meet all these incredible Dr. Surin, who has, I think, great potential. I'm very impressed with Dr. Surin. Anand, who I think was, frankly, I think Anand was the best prime minister ever, probably. And Mijai is totally amazing. Mijai is so gracious. Whenever I bring students to Thailand, Mijai is willing to talk to my students and explain about his AIDS education and all the things that he's done to help Thai development. Another thing that's very helpful for researchers in Thailand, you have so many intellectuals in Thailand that we can draw upon their work. And unfortunately, many Western scholars are not aware of these Thai scholars or don't pay attention to their work, including Brady Bononio, whose statue we saw in the video. I love his book called, I think it's very powerful, Pamben Anijang Samho. The Impermanence of Society. I think it really helps to understand Thailand. And as I mentioned before, Punatat is considered one of the greatest intellectuals, very productive, one of the greatest intellectuals of the last century. John Bunsalong, he was a professor at Thammasat, did some really fine work on the Chinese in Thailand, a PhD from Cornell. John Sulak, extensive publications. I need to get to his bookstore probably on Saturday, his bookstore near the Democracy Monument, to check out what new books are available there. Unfortunately, when I was here at Thammasat, I did not get to know Dr. Poi, but I have many of his books. And Hong Rachong Hakim really helped me to understand this Thai social stratification system with his excellent book published by Cornell. And of course, Hong Rachong Hakim, The Sea Rain, The Four Rains, powerful novel explaining the Thai royal history. And also, as you know, movie star, playing in The Ugly American. And Sunitsa Ekachai wrote a wonderful book, Seeing Jatisan, Voices from the Northeast. She's a journalist at the Bangkok Post. Does some very fine work on Buddhism, and especially on Isan. Also in Thailand, it's been very easy to have contact with university leaders. And that's also very helpful as you try to understand leadership in higher education and the role of higher education in Thailand. And John Buncha, He was the first president of VIA. He was the one who very kindly hired me to work here at Thammasat. I owe a great debt to him for deciding to hire me and give me the chance to work as an academic here at Thammasat. This is just a visual of the Thai book exhibitions that they have. I like to be here in April, so I can attend. These are just amazing. Actually, Dr. Kim took me to a book exhibition in Seoul, and they have every April. This was the Wisaikat of Mongnuan Madin Chumsai. And at first it was very small, but now it's huge. And I just love going there. They have Economic and International. It goes on for, I think, about a whole week or 10 days. Just so many books. And you know, Bangkok was defined as the book capital of the world. Okay, now the downside. These are the parts of doing research in Thailand that are not so pleasant. You have a draconian laissez-majesty law. And it's my view, we must respect the laws of every country. If a John Doon comes to America, I think you have to follow our laws, right? Right? If you go to France, you have to follow the laws of France. So if we're in Thailand, we have to follow the laws of every country. And I find it very naive when people think, oh, I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm from Colorado. I don't have to follow the Thai law. Sorry. You're from New Zealand, but if you come to America, you have to follow our laws. So, but this means that when you're writing, I had to write about King Rama VIII. When I write about King Rama VIII, I have to be very careful. Very, very careful. So you have to be mindful of those laws. And the cyber laws are also very strict. So you have to be very careful. One of my Thai colleagues, who's a professor at the university, posted something on Facebook. I'm going to send him a note saying, get that off of Facebook. It's very dangerous. I don't know why he posted on Facebook, but it could get him in trouble with the article as well. And then you also have a draconian defamation law. And many people don't realize this is very, very, David Streckfus has written a whole book about this. In the Thai case, if you defame someone, and it's true, what you're saying about that person is true, you're even more guilty. Because it really hurts. It really hurts. In America, it's different. In America, if you criticize me, I can sue you for libel, but if what you're saying is a lie, then you're in trouble. But if it's true, you're not in trouble. So right now, our former governor of Minnesota, Ventura, is suing the people of the American Sniper, because in the book, the writer defamed our governor. But in the US, you can say anything you want about Obama. If you're a public figure, there's no libel law. In Thailand, it's very different. So a lady at the Bangkok Post, Italy Fry, no relation to me, she wrote an article claiming, correctly, that a high-ranking Thai official had plagiarized his dissertation. He had not written his dissertation. He had stolen the, plagiarized.
Professor, but in Thailand, now is currently used the guidance to the solution.
So what?
God is the solution for this situation.
What is
If anyone has some computer, they have the God should. There's a whole book. There's a whole book called Hired Guns. There's a Thai language book that's called Hired Guns. And that's a part of this, part of that novel. That is also something that can happen. But if you, so when I was doing my last book, John Sulak warned me, be very, very careful. I'm not talking about laissez-majesty. I'm talking about Kimberly Fry, who defamed this high-ranking servant. He complained to the police, and the police went to arrest her. She's guilty. She's totally guilty. And she has to know the Thai law. In the Thai law, if you criticize somebody and cause them to lose face, defame them, you are subject to imprisonment. It's different than the U.S. You have to know the laws of the country where you're working. So her friend told her, police are coming to get you. And And she escaped before the police arrived at her apartment. หนีไปกลับมาว่าเกือบจะโดนอยู่เรียนคุก3 ปี 5 ปี Because it's true. What she said is true. And she wrote it in the Bangkok Post. So David Stradlin wrote a whole book about the Thai. It's draconian. It's draconian. And even here, you can be sued for criticizing Abhisit or for criticizing Thaksin. It's amazing here. So be careful. Be careful. Also, to do research formally in Thailand, you have to get approval from the National Research Council. And that can be a cumbersome bureaucratic process. And when I do research in Japan, I do research in the Netherlands, you don't have to go through that process. But here, unless you're a Fulbright, I think if you're Fulbright, there are certain things. If you're a Fulbright scholar, you don't have to get that in Japan.
If you're based in the university here, then you
That's a good question. I think maybe if you're a Thammasat professor, you're a Mahidol, you're part of the system, you're not like a researcher coming in from outside. But there is a gatekeeper. Indonesia has LIPI. They have a similar agency in Indonesia. When I was in the Netherlands, there's no such process. There's no such process in the United States. Another interesting issue is interviewers in Thailand. When you're interviewing people, a problem that people like to tell you what you want to hear. So how do you get them to speak really frankly? That's a real challenge. So it's kind of a mixed bag. So sometimes it's they're very candid with you, and other times it's really hard to get them to be candid. Though sometimes, if you have another glass of Mekong, give them some Mekong to drink, and then after the third glass of Mekong, and you can always throw the data away. You can always throw the data away. So. And then sometimes when you're using Thai studies, it's very frustrating because there's a lack of data. They don't tell you when the book was published. There's missing data in the publication. That's very frustrating. And finally, sorry, it doesn't show up on the slide there. There are bureaucratic constraints. I was working on a book with 2 colleagues, and the book was going to be published in Canada in French, English, and Spanish. And one of the Thai bureaucrats thought the book made Thailand look bad. That some parts of the book made Thailand, so he didn't want the book published. And so finally the people at IDRC in Canada told my 2 colleagues, and we spent so much time working on this project, huge amount of research. And the official in Canada said, if this is not approved within the next month, forget it. Forget it, we're not going to publish it. And so it ended up being published only in English, not French and Spanish, because this Thai bureaucrat was delaying publication of the book. So that can be very frustrating. We have these bureaucratic aspects. Okay, let me finish up here in the last 15 minutes with some reflections on higher education over the years. But first off, so what's right about it? There are some things that are very good about higher education. Then what are some of the basic problems? The research shows that the Thai students are, Thai students are very happy. I think in one of the surveys it said the Thai students are number 2 in the world for being happy.
Really?
Yeah, and so when I was teaching at Kasetsa, I lived right at the campus, and I spent a semester there teaching, and lots of sports activities. I thought the students seemed to be very happy, very, very happy. I think Dr. Kim stepped out for a moment. Korean students are very unhappy. They have to study until midnight with all the coaching schools, and so happiness is kind of important. What's more important than being happy? So that's the Thai should feel pretty good that their students are happy. And you have many now very impressive campuses. I took my students last year to see Mahawar Assumption in Bang Na. Oh, they are amazed. They didn't expect to find this kind of campus in Thailand. There are many wonderful. The Chula campus, the Khon Kaen campus, the Chiang Mai campus. You have a lot of even remote. I went to a remote school where I stayed 50 years ago in Mae Sot. It's now much better. The physical, the football field. There's really good infrastructure now, and you have plenty of complementary support staff. At my university, Thanatikambadi Dokapore. The president of my university has to drive the car himself. But in Thailand, I have a lot of colleagues who have a car and driver. You have lots of vans, you have lots of drivers.
They have lots of complementary staff. And then also with the, Dr. Ratana has written about this, with the autonomy in higher education, today compared to the past, leaders and administrators in higher education have more opportunity to make their own decisions compared to the past. And that's probably in many respects positive. Many Thais, we see this in this room, many Thais are educated at the best universities in the world. You have many brilliant Thai educators. And if you look at the average educational level today of Thai teachers and administrators, it's actually very high compared to many other countries in Africa and Latin America. The formal educational level, many educational administrators have master's degrees, many teachers now have bachelor's degrees. It's pretty good. And now there are many opportunities for advanced study locally, like the lady that I mentioned, Dr. Rosalind from Bungan, who just got a PhD in a doctoral program offered by the Rajapata Udon. And then Sumotai Hamatira has made education available to people throughout the kingdom through their very innovative teaching through all kinds of modern technology. Very innovative.
Professor, I would like to know what is the meaning of Una, and because...
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped that one. Una Boynet is very important. Glad you asked. Sorry for skipping that. That's from Spanish. And what it means is that it's not about mathematics, it's not about science, it's not about reading. It means that you are educated to be a good person. You are educated to be malayati. That you behave politely, you show respect. And I have found in Thailand that many Thais with low education, formal education, still have very refined, very polite mannerism, behavior. That's why I think in that sense, Thailand's doing pretty well with creating students, young students. Like when I was teaching those kids in Hanuman, in the remote part of Isan, they are so respectful. They're so respectful and very polite. They're learning how to be polite people, respectful people. I'm not talking about being environmentally oriented or that type of thing, or talking about civic education, voting. I'm talking about just being polite, thoughtful people. And that's what they call una buena educación. Etiquette. It's about etiquette. It's about behavior, being respectful. And in the United States, we don't do too well with that. In the United States, we don't do too well with that. Now, what are the problems? That's the good side of hygiene. What are the problems? How can you escape the middle income trap? In one of the recent publications of Her Royal Highness Princess Patay, she mentions that the average educational level, remember I mentioned my father did not go to high school, the average educational level of the Thai workforce is 8.7 years. This is the results of education in the past. So it's really imperative to improve the quality of the existing workforce, or you're going to get stuck in this middle income trap. And last year, your investment in research and development for Thailand was only 0.5%. 1/2, that's very low. Very low. If you want to have an innovative society, it's imperative, and Dr. Yonyo, as Deputy Prime Minister, is very aware of this. You've got to improve and enhance R&D expenditures, get more innovation. Paul Krugman is probably the most famous economist in the United States at Princeton, said the future of any country depends on the productivity of its people. I show my students a graph of what happened in Japan from 1960 to 1990. Productivity per person increased faster than any time in the history of the world. Oh. And during that time, Japan had this incredible economic growth. Same thing with the miracle on the Han River in Korea. The Koreans improved their productivity. They invested heavily in R&D, very heavily investing. And they now have the fastest internet system in the world, have the biggest, most powerful chips in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And in Thailand, too, there's still an education, and we see this with the Assumption campus in Bang Na, all of that marble, all the beautiful art at Assumption. But in terms of some other basics, are not so good.
in terms of ICT, salaries of professors, things like that. And I remember I go to Khon Kaen often, and they built a beautiful, Khon Kaen is probably the second biggest campus in the world after Stanford. And they built a beautiful fence around the campus. Beautiful fence. Is that education? And it's creating a barrier between the university and the community. Is that beautiful fence? Is that education? I visited a remote private school in Chayapur. Oh, so we have an Olympic now. Oh, beautiful Olympic swimming pool. ผมเช็คกับอัฟสมานคุณภาพของโรงเรียนนี้ดีไหมบอกไม่ดี The actual quality of education in school is poor, but they have this beautiful Olympic swimming pool. So in the Thai case, I think there's still too much investment in สิ่งที่เป็นรูปธรรม the concrete, highly visible physical structure, and not the quality of education.
Is it seem like all of higher education look at the fashion, not function, right?
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's very to have this beautiful world-class campus, and it does help you attract
Fashion
students.
is not function.
And it does help you attract students. It does help you attract students. And we need to focus not on education for all. It should be quality education for all. Quality, so that the student in a remote part of Buriram, or a student in a remote part of Surin, or in a remote part of Chayapum has the same opportunity for quality education as somebody in the capital. And we, again, this comes up many times, need to focus on what Dr. Gawit called KITBIN, problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, innovation. There are still huge problems around regional disparities. And I also find this is true even in the United States. Very uneven ICT capabilities and capacities. In a recent survey done by the Gates Foundation, in the United States, only 40% of university professors in the US are aware of the new technologies that can help improve our teaching and learning. And of the 40%, only 20% are actually using them. So only 40% are aware of these technologies, and of the 40%, then only about half of those are actually using them to improve their classrooms. Again, when you go to the remote areas of Thailand, many of the women who unfortunately are working in Pattaya or working at Pampong or in Phuket in the commercial sex industry, if you check their human capital, hey, they might be migrants from Burma, they might be migrants from Laos, or they generally have very low human capital, so they don't have too many choices. So if we improve the human capital of those women in those remote areas and their HRD, then hopefully they'll be less vulnerable to the commercial sex industry. Again, the quality of education really depends on the quality of teachers. So Finland and Korea have done a great job of really finding a way to get the best people in their countries to go into teaching. So Thailand has to figure this out, and so does the US, how to get their people to go into teaching. Also, we need to focus on Gansisa Buranagan. I think that was in your video. Buranagan. We need to teach people not just mathematics, not just reading, but also teach them these other things that are so important. Moral education. Oh, you do. Yeah, good moral education. I have seen they're the best. The Japanese moral education, unbelievable. Why Japan? Man, you won't get anything stolen in Japan. At the gym, I'm a sports person, so I went to the gym. They don't even have locks on the lockers at the gym in Nagoya. Oh, at the University of Minnesota, if you don't have a lock on your locker, your stuff will be stolen. So moral education, civic education, voting with knowledge, and voting in an intelligent way, environmental. When I get to Thailand, I love Thailand, but I'm always shocked. People just throw garbage on the streets, throw garbage around. It's really sad. There's just not this mindfulness that, if I have some garbage and there's no garbage, I put it in my pocket. Because I won't put it on the street. And Switzerland, Switzerland. Like Japan is good in moral education, Switzerland is very good in cleanliness, this type of thing.
I think because of Thailand higher education is not support to the responsibility.
Yeah, this is it. This is kind of environmental responsibility. And then nutrition, health. สมัยก่อนผมไปโรงเรียนไม่มีคนอ้วน Now, today when I go to see the school, a lot of the children are quite fat. Oh, they love the Krispy Kreme, what is it, Krispy Kreme donut? Oh, อร่อยมาก They love the KFC chicken. They love the McDonald's.
So you should be so around.
So the nutritional education is very important to ออกกำลังตลอดชีวิต to exercise your whole life, things like that. To build up that kind of mentality. So then of course now and also financial education, the dangers of credit cards. อันตรายนะพวก credit card เดี๋ยวเป็นเด็ดเยอะ and a lot of farmers, as you in Thailand, farmers and teachers. A lot of teachers have a lot of debt. A lot of farmers have a lot of debt. So financial education is very important as well. And then in terms of the ASEAN, the ASEAN area, Thailand really needs to focus on improvement in intercultural, multicultural, multilingual education. So more Thai can speak Vietnamese well, more Thai can speak Malay well, more Thais can speak Burmese well, more Thais can speak Khmer well, more Thais can speak Lao well, etc. And then there are some paradoxes. I'll close with paradoxes and we'll open up to questions. Thailand spends a lot on education. Often you're right at the top. 25% of the national budget of Thailand goes for education. But you don't get adequate bang for your buck. We spend a lot of money on education, but we don't see the results. A lot of investment in UNESCO. And Dr. Somwon did a wonderful job of creating UNESCO. We were very proud of him and what he did there. That's 10% of your education budget is used by UNESCO for evaluating your schools. But what's the progress? I just saw the latest results of the entrance exam at the university. It's very disappointing. The ONET scores were very disappointing. The PISA results, the PIM results, very disappointing. Many brilliant educators, but again, despite all these brilliant educators, I think one time I checked the Ministry of Education had 400 people with PhDs at the Ministry of Education. ทำงานอยู่จบมหาวิทยาลัยที่ดีที่สุดในโลก 400 people at the Ministry of Education. I'm not sure what they're doing. And then you have this booming, and then you have the Thai economic success, despite the serious educational problems, still really quite impressive economic success. So that's kind of a paradox. And then again, this booming book and publishing industry, but not a reading culture. As I move around Thailand, I see people looking at not at books, but they're looking at their devices. And Thailand now has over 100% of its people, 100% of the people in Bangkok are using Facebook. Over 100%. อันดับที่หนึ่งในโลก
The capital of Facebook is Bangkok.
And that's the capital, yeah. Over 100% using Facebook. But yet you have the big book exhibition, this booming publishing access paradox. But how can it not be a reading culture? You know, all these books. Are they just for show? Why don't we stop here? And let's open it up to questions. Any questions? Just a kind of overview of my experience doing research in Thailand and then some of my thoughts about the major problems facing Thai education. So any questions? And so we need to rethink higher education, given all these problems.
Before we go into the Q&A, and Mr. Ratana actually summarized Thai, so
Okay.
All
อันนี้ทำหน้าที่สรุปนะคะไม่ได้ทำหน้าที่ดีเบตเพราะว่าฟังดูแล้วบางทีรู้สึกอยู่ในคนละโลกกับอาจารย์ปลายนะคะทำวิจัยด้านการศึกษามาก็ไม่คิดว่าเจอผู้ใหญ่ง่ายนะคะแล้วก็ไม่ได้คิดว่าคนไทยใจดีขนาดที่อาจารย์ปลายมองก็เราก็เลยไม่แน่จะฟังแล้วไม่แน่ใจว่าเป็นเรื่องทางด้านวัฒนธรรมด้วยหรือเปล่าแล้วก็อายุเล็กน้อยอะไรอย่างนี้โอเคค่ะขออนุญาตสรุปนะคะก็อาจารย์ปลายพูดถึงถ้าจะสรุปง่ายๆก็อาจจะมี3ประเด็นนะคะว่าข้อดีของการทำวิจัยหรือว่าข้อ advantage ข้อดีของการทำวิจัยในเมืองไทยหรือว่าเราก็มีข้ ข้อยากหรือ challenge ในการทำนะคะและในที่สุดก็คือความขัดแย้งกันระหว่างสิ่งที่เราเข้าใจกับสิ่งที่มันเป็นในสังคมก็อาจารย์ปลายกล่าวว่านะคะเมืองไทยเนี่ยเป็น data rich society ก็คือเป็นประเทศหรือว่าเป็นสังคมที่มีข้อมูลอยู่มากมายแล้วคนไทยก็ใจดีค่ะแบ่งปันความรู้หรือว่าสามารถการเข้าไปสัมภาษณ์หรือว่าจะเข้าไปติดต่อทำวิจัยกับผู้มีอิทธิพลหรือผู้ที่มีpower ในการศึกษาในวงการศึกษาเนี่ยค่อนข้างง่ายอันนี้สำหรับอันยากมากเลยก็แล้วก็สำหรับอาจารย์ปานมองว่าคนไทยเนี่ย fun to work with ก็คือสนุกสนานนะคะแล้วก็เมืองไทยมีระบบสาธารณูปโภคเกี่ยวกับการทำวิจัยที่ค่อนข้างดีตัวอย่างเช่นThailand Research Center ที่จุฬานะคะแล้วก็เวลาทำวิจัยในเมืองไทยอาจารย์ปานมองว่าการได้รับเสียงตอบรับในการทำวิจัยหรือการเก็บข้อมูลนี่ค่อนข้างเป็นไปในทางที่บวกแล้วก็ข้อหนึ่งอาจารย์ก็บอกว่าอยู่ในเมืองไทยเนี่ยเขาสามารถเข้าไปสัมภาษณ์ผู้ที่มีpower ในมหาวิทยาลัยค่อนข้างง่ายคือถ้าเปรียบเทียบกับอเมริกาอาจจะยากกว่ามากที่จะเข้าไปสัมภาษณ์คณบดีอธิการบดีหรือแม้กระทั่งประธานาธิบดีในอเมริกาซึ่งอาจารย์ปายก็ให้ตัวอย่างว่าท่านก็ได้สัมภาษณ์นายกรัฐมนตรีของประเทศไทยนะคะแล้วก็ข้อที่เป็นอาจจะเป็นเรื่องที่เหนื่อยแล้วก็เป็นประเด็นปัญหาในการทำวิจัยในเมืองไทยก็เกี่ยวกับมาตรา 112 นะคะซึ่งค่อนข้างดราโกเนียนจะดราโกเนียนขนาดไหนนี้ต้องเป็นอีกท็อปิกหนึ่งเซมินาร์หนึ่งนะคะแล้วก็จะไปพูดถึงว่าการจะมาทำข้อมูลหรือการเก็บวิจัยในเมืองไทยเนี่ยเราต้องขออนุญาต National Research Council ซึ่งอาจจะความยากของ Red Tape นี่ก็ค่อนข้างจะเยอะนะคะแล้วก็ข้อนี้เป็นประเด็นที่เห็นด้วยมากๆค่ะว่าคนไทยเนี่ยมักจะพูดในสิ่งที่เราอยากได้ยินนะคะเราก็เจอกันอยู่ทุกวันตอนนี้ก็กำลังสรุปในสิ่งที่ทุกท่านอยากได้ยินอยู่นะคะก็มันก็จะยากในการแยกกันระหว่างสิ่งที่เป็นความจริงที่เขาอยากบอกเราหรือว่าสิ่งที่เขาอยากบอกเราเขาคิดว่าเราจะไปรีเสิร์ชหรือจะไปเขียนชื่อเขาไม่สำคัญอะไรอย่างนี้นะคะแล้วก็อาจารย์ปายมองว่าข้อหนึ่งของคนไทยก็คือรักษาหน้าก็กลัวที่จะดูไม่ดีในสายตาคนอื่นถ้าจะผลิตงานวิจัยที่เป็นวิจัยเชิงวิพากษ์หรือวิจัยเชิงวิจารณ์เกี่ยวกับสังคมก็จะค่อนข้างยากในการตีพิมพ์นะคะแล้วก็ค่ะอาจารย์ปายกล่าวประเด็น2ประเด็นสุดท้ายก็คือว่าอะไรที่มันมีข้อที่คนอื่นคิดว่าการศึกษาไทยมันเป็นแบบนี้อะไรที่ใช่กับอะไรที่ไม่ใช่อาจารย์พายมองว่าเด็กไทยนี่ค่อนข้างจะมีความสุขนะคะเด็กไทยเรียนไม่ค่อยสนุกเท่าไหร่นะคะจริงๆอันนี้ต้องเป็นฟุตโนตแต่ว่าในภาพรวมอาจารย์พายมองว่าเด็กไทยเนี่ยมีความสุขมากกว่าเด็กเกาหลีหรือเด็กฮ่องกงหรือเด็กญี่ปุ่นที่เรียนหนักมากๆก็เป็นเรื่องของ relative นะคะแล้วก็ในระบบมหาวิทยาลัยตอนนี้เราก็มีอิสรภาพในการตัดสินใจมากขึ้นเนื่องจากนโยบายออกนอกระบบค่ะแล้วก็มีอะไรเสริมไหมคะเห็นหัวเราะไม่แน่ใจว่าเห็นด้วยหรือไม่เห็นด้วยอันนี้ถามตามมารยาทนะคะแล้วก็ข้อหนึ่งที่เป็นการขัดแย้งกันในสิ่งที่ในตัวเลขกับความเป็นจริงที่เกิดขึ้นนะคะก็คือเราเนี่ยใช้เงินในการทำการศึกษาเยอะมากๆแต่เราอาจจะไม่เห็นผลที่ชัดเจนนะคะแล้วก็อย่างตัวอย่างเช่นที่อาจารย์พายกก็คือสมศว่าเรา invest ในสมศเยอะมากแล้วผลก็ที่ออกมาก็ไม่ค่อยจะเป็นที่น่าพอใจสักเท่าไหร่นะคะแล้วถึงแม้ว่าเราจะมีคนนักการศึกษาที่จบมหาลัยดีๆอันนี้เห็นด้วยมากๆค่ะเรามีนักการศึกษาที่จบมหาลัยดังระดับโลกมากมายแต่ความเป็นจริงของการศึกษาก็ค่อนข้างล้าหลังนะคะเราเหมือนส่งนักเรียนไปเรียน first world แต่กลับมาก็ยัง third world อยู่เหมือนเดิมแล้วก็สุดท้ายนะคะก็ตัวอย่างเช่นที่อาจารย์บอกว่ามันเป็น paradox ก็คือเรามี publishing industry มีการจัดสัปดาห์หนังสือแห่งชาติมีสิ่งพิมพ์มากมายแต่ว่าการอ่านก็ยังไม่ได้เป็นวัฒนธรรมสำหรับคนไทยนะคะก็นี่เป็นสรุปย่อๆสิ่งที่อาจารย์ฟรายพูดมาแล้วก็ถ้ามีคำถามอะไรขอเชิญเลยนะคะขอเปิดฟลอร์ค่ะ